This is the insane truth behind Quiznos' collapse. In the early 2000s, Quiznos was Subway's biggest threat. They had the toasted subs, the aggressive branding and explosive growth to 4,700 locations and nearly $2 billion in sales. But the entire business model was built on a lie. This isn't a story about bad food or tough competition. It's about a company designed to fail from the inside out. The real product wasn't sandwiches, it was franchise agreements sold to franchisees who became the company's real customers. This story ends with mass lawsuits, financial ruin for thousands, and for one franchisee named Bhupinder Baber, it ended in tragedy. The story starts in 1981, when Jimmy Lombardos opened the first Quiznos in Denver, Colorado. His big idea was simple: toast the sub. It seems obvious now, but back then, it was revolutionary. The warmth, the melted cheese, it made the sandwich feel more like a meal. That simple innovation was the foundation everything else was built on. The real growth kicked into high gear in the 1990s when Rick Shodden and his father bought the chain. They saw the potential, and went all in on franchising. This was the era of rapid expansion. They went from just 18 locations to over 1,000 by the turn of the millennium. The early 2000s were the golden years. You might even remember their bizarre but unforgettable ads with the Spong monkeys. They were everywhere.
Quiznos subs!
By 2007, Quiznos had hit its peak, those 4,700 stores we mentioned. On the surface it looked like an unstoppable success story. But beneath that shiny exterior, a critical flaw was already rotting the foundation. While the company was focused on selling franchises, it had quietly created a subsidiary called American Food Distributors, or AFD. This single decision would become the chain's fatal flaw. This is where the model breaks. In a normal franchise, the parent company makes money when the franchisee makes money. They earn a royalty, a small percentage of sales. Their incentive is to help the franchisee succeed. Quiznos flipped that model on its head. They created American Food Distributors, a company-owned subsidiary that became the sole supplier for every Quiznos location. Franchisees were contractually obligated to buy everything from AFD, the meat, the bread, the cheese, even the paper bags and the music that played in the store, and they were charged a massive markup, often 30 to 40% higher than what they could get on the open market. Let's break down the math, because this is the core of the insanity. The average Quiznos location was bringing in about $400,000 a year in revenue. But with food costs skyrocketing to nearly 40% of that revenue, about 10 points higher than the industry average, and then adding a 7% royalty fee and a 4% advertising fee on top, there was simply no profit left. Franchisees were working 80-hour weeks just to break even, or worse, to lose money. The warning signs started flashing early. Lawsuits from franchisees began piling up as early as 2006. An internal memo from 2003 allegedly revealed that a shocking 40% of Quiznos locations weren't even breaking even. The company knew the system was broken, but the money from selling supplies was too good to give up. And then there's the human cost. The ultimate proof that this was more than just a bad business deal. In 2006, a franchisee named Bhupinder Baber was found dead in the bathroom of his own Quiznos restaurant. He had taken his own life. He left a note. In it, he directly blamed the company's exploitative practices and the fact that they had oversold his market, putting another Quiznos right down the street and cannibalizing his sales. He felt trapped. This wasn't an isolated case. It was the most extreme symptom of a system that was crushing the very people it relied on. But instead of fixing the problem, corporate Quiznos was about to make a decision that would push the entire system over the edge. Because while franchisees were struggling to survive, the company's owners were about to cash out in a way that would lock in the destructive model forever. By 2009, the franchisees had had enough. They were losing their life savings, their homes, their futures, and they decided to fight back, not as individuals, but as a unified force. What followed was one of the largest franchisee rebellions in American business history. Thousands of current and former Quiznos operators banded together and filed a massive class action lawsuit against the company. The allegations were severe: fraud, deceptive practices, breach of contract, and even violations of federal racketeering laws, the same laws used to prosecute organized crime. The heart of their claim was simple: Quiznos had created a system designed not for mutual success, but to systematically transfer wealth from franchisees to the corporate parent through its inflated supply chain. The legal battle dragged on for years, but in 2010 a federal judge approved a monumental settlement. The total value was estimated at $206 million. It was one of the largest settlements ever between a franchisor and its franchisees. The deal included cash payouts to individual franchisees, supply discounts, and debt forgiveness. But perhaps more telling than the money were the structural changes the company was forced to agree to. Quiznos had to create an independent franchisee association. They had to submit to annual third-party audits of their supply prices to prove they weren't gouging their own partners. They had to establish a formal program to help franchisees who wanted to sell their failing stores. Every single term of the settlement was an admission that the system was fundamentally broken. The court was essentially forcing Quiznos to start acting like a real franchise company, one that cared about its operators' profitability. But here's the tragic part. The settlement came too late. The trust was gone. The brand's reputation was in tatters. Customers were confused by the coupon rebellions, and the recession of 2009 was hitting every restaurant hard. Quiznos locations began closing at an astonishing rate. 700 stores vanished in 2009 alone. Another 800 shut down in 2010. You could find used Quiznos toaster ovens and sandwich units on Craigslist for pennies on the dollar. It was a fire sale. The company was trapped by its own design. Even if it wanted to help franchisees, it couldn't. That leveraged buyout in 2006 had left the company saddled with nearly $1 billion in debt. The revenue from American food distributors wasn't just profit anymore, it was essential to making the interest payments on that debt. To save the franchisees, they would have had to kill the corporate parent. So the closures continued, year after year, in a downward spiral there was no escaping from. The final act came in 2014. Quiznos filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, listing $875 million in loan obligations it could no longer service. The once mighty chain with 4,700 locations had shrunk to fewer than 400 in the United States. Today, there are less than 200 left. It's a ghost of its former self, a case study in how not to run a franchise. To understand why this happened, you have to look at the fundamental difference between Quiznos and its successful competitors. Look at Subway. Look at Jimmy John's. Their business models are built on a simple principle. Corporate success depends on franchisee success. If the guy running the store makes money, the company makes money. It's a partnership. Quiznos built its model on the opposite principle. Corporate success came at the expense of franchisee success. The company made more money from selling overpriced supplies than it did from royalties. Their incentive wasn't to help the store owner sell more sandwiches. Their incentive was to sell the store owner more expensive meat and cheese. They were their franchisee's worst supplier. This is the enduring lesson from the Quiznos collapse, and it's why this story matters to anyone thinking about business. The ultimate measure of a franchise's health isn't its unit count or its brand recognition, it's the profitability of the average franchisee. If the operators on the ground aren't making money, the entire empire is built on sand. It doesn't matter how good the product is. Quiznos had the better sandwich, but Subway had the better business model. And in the end, the business model is what survives. The company is now under new ownership, trying to stage a comeback with a promise to put franchisees first. But the damage is done. The name Quiznos will forever be associated with a catastrophic failure, born not of market forces, but of a profound greed that turned partners into prey. The story of Quiznos is a tragedy in multiple acts. It's the tragedy of thousands of hardworking people who lost everything they invested. It's the tragedy of Bhupinder Baber, who saw no way out. And it's the tragedy of a brand that had every advantage: a great product, rapid growth, customer loyalty, but threw it all away for a short-term scheme that guaranteed long-term collapse. The insane truth is that they knew. Internal memos showed they knew the system was broken. Lawsuits warned them for years. But they couldn't stop, because the machine was too profitable for the people at the top. They built an empire, but they forgot the most important rule. You have to build it with your partners, not on top of them. That single distinction is what separates lasting businesses from spectacular failures. If you want to see more stories of companies that destroyed themselves from within, subscribe to the channel. The next one we're covering made the exact same mistake, but on an even larger scale.